So he follows the first opinion of Rav Chia bar Rav Yochanan, follows this Tana of this Braita, as opposed to the Tana Kama, who said it's only midrabanan. So what does he do with this pasuk? Hai lo yilbash gever. How does he understand this pasuk? Because he says it's only moving it midrabanan. Moving hair is only midrabanan. So look what the Tana Kama says. Hai lo yilbash gever, my darish pe. So he says, I need it for the following teaching of the Braita. Lo yechli gever al isha, my tamalom. What's it coming to teach me? Im shelo yilbash ish simlat isha. Vi isha simlat ish. If you want to tell me that it's coming to teach me you just can't wear the opposite gender's clothes, meaning it's a little dochak in the language. He says, Hari kvar nemer toivai, ve'en kan toiva. I think the kvar nemer means in the pasuk it's calling it a toiva. And the actual essence of wearing the opposite gender's clothing is not a toiva. So, what's it coming to teach me according to the Tana Kama? Ella shelo yabash ish simlat isha v'yeshev bein anashim v'isha simlat ish v'teshev bein ha'anashim. So the Tana Kama learns from this pasuk and says, if you had to say, what did the Tana Kama say? What do we learn from this pasuk? Conceptual 1, 2, or 3? 3. No. Right? 3. Right? Yeah, you had a 33% chance, right? And a third, right? So he's saying, the Tana Kama seems to be saying, could be number 3, could be number 2 also. Okay? What is the Isur? The Isur is when you're wearing it and you're amongst the Anashim and Nashim and vice versa. Okay? We'll see how it could be number 2, how Rashi explained that line. But Rav Elazar ben Yaakov then says, Minayin shelo teitze isha b'klei zayin lemelchama. Where do I know that a woman can't have guns in a war? Tamalomar lo yechli glever al isha lo yabash gever simlat isha shelo yitaken ish b'tikune isha. A man shouldn't be wearing or adorned with woman's clothes, and a woman shouldn't, based on the Gemara that says a woman doesn't go out to war. Now, what?
In general, not.
In general, it's that's in general what the Gemara in Kiddushin and Daf Bet Amid, that's what it's referring to. The derech of an ish is to go to the milchaman, and not of a dark of an isha. That's what it's basing it on.
Nothing to do with like what it might lead to, just by itself.
Good. That's a valid point. That's part of the question.
That's the second opinion then. It's not.
That's part of the question, right? And again, but this is Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. The first one was the Tana Kama. So to try to bring this off the daf for a second, okay, which is, what we have here is we have the first Lashon in the Gemara that says there's only Isuri Darabanan. To, like, for example, to remove the hair from under your armpits. And then, sorry to be grotesque. And the second language seems to say no, that it's an Isur Deoraita, Lo Yilbash Gever Simat Isha. And from here, then we have seemingly a machloket between the Tana Kama and then Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. Tana Kama says, well, we talked about the conceptual framework, what Natan said, the Isur Be'etzem, that's not a Toiva. It's only either number 2 or 3, right? Either it's a built-in Isur Deoraita because you're going to come to sit to do something, which is what I think how Rashi understands it. If you look at Rashi, in page number 2, Rashi says, in that first Rashi, Im lomad shelo yilbash, klomar, vim amar lecha katuv, shelo yilbash ha'ish simlat isha, lekach lo kara katuv toivahi, it's not a toiva, el lamu ba, shelo yilbash ha'ish simlat isha, v'yelech v'yeshev ben anashim. Why? Because we're afraid that you're going to come to do yichud. Right? That's how Rashi said it. Meaning the problem of wearing the clothes is you might come, we had talked about pretzels, he says it's like how Rashi I think understood it was more like what Ms. Berger was saying was number 2. That it's an Isur Doraita leading into maybe you come either to do Yichud or we had talked about pretzels as opposed to what Sarah had said, which I think is the simple pshat in the Gemara, is number 3. Whereas an Isur Doraita, because we're afraid, right, the only Isur is when you actually go there. As opposed to what it seems to be if I just had to quickly summarize and not to get, I don't want to get too, but it's just important to understand what happened in this Gemara. We had two different Lashonot. The first Lashon is the removing the hair of the armpits only Issur D'Rabbanan. If we go like the second Lashon, the removing of the hair is an Issur D'Oraita of Lo Yobash. And then we have seemingly a machloka between Tanakama and Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. The problem is if you look at the Rambam. The next source is that the Rambam seems to contradict himself. Because the Rambam, we've seen this Gemara, in Halacha Tet, in chapter 12 of Hilchot Avodah Zarah, says by removing the hair, it's only Isur Midarabanan. So seemingly, who's the Rambam paskening like? The first Lashon or the second Lashon? The first Lashon, right? Then the problem is, but then he says in Halacha Yud, he quotes everything which we just talked about also, of Lo Ta'adei Isha Idei Aish, כגון שתשים בראשה מצנפת או כובע או תלבש שריון וכיוצא בו, או שתגלח ראשה כאיש, ולא יעדי אישה כגון שיובש בגדי צבעונים, etc. במקום שאין לובשים אותן הכלים, etc. And if you do, you get malkos min ha-Torah. So if you look at the Beit Yosef, he says the Rif, paskin like the Lishna Kama, like we just said. It's only Asar Midarabanan. So is the opinion of the Rush, and so is the Rambam that we just saw. So it sounds like that the halacha is not like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, right? That it's an Isur, that there's an Isur D'Oraita, right? If you read the Beit Yosef inside, right, with all the thing that's marked, I'll just read it for you quickly because I want to get don't want to get too bogged down at this point. But he says, Pasak Arif, Kalish Nekama, the Rav Chia bar Abba, and Rav Yochanan, the Amar Lo Mitzar Ha'avarat Shechi, Ubeit Ha'erva, Midarabanan, V'chein Nira Das Rosh, V'hu Dat Rambam, in Halacha Tet. Ulefizeh Nira Delet Hilchata Ki Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. The Ha'amrina, the Lish Nekama, the Amar Ha'avarat Shechi, Eina Midivrei Tom, Midivrei Sofrim, Dorish Kra, Kitana Kama, the Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. The Lo Asar, it's only going like the Tanakama understand. Delo aser ela shelo yibash ish simat isha v'yashav ben anashim. Ava kol she'eno holech v'yoshev ben hanashim. If I'm not actually sitting there, there's no isur min haTorah. Because the either Rav Elazar ben Yaakov af al pi she'eno yoshev ben anashim. We had said, right, the second lashon, according to Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, he said there's an isur to wear the opposite gender's clothes. Asur min haTorah. L'takein tikkunei isha. If that's a problem, because the Rambam then contradicts himself. Just to try to bring it so not so confusing again, we seem to be, it was all fine and good if we read Halacha Tes. For Halacha Tes, then the Rambam was exactly like the Rif and the Rush, that were passing like the Lishna Kama, that it's only Issur D'Rabbanan. The problem is that the Isur to wear the opposite gender's clothes, that was only based on the pasuk of Lo Yobash Gever, which is the Lishna Basra, right? Which would be like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, right? And the first Halacha Tet is only going like the Tanakama and not like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov. So the Rambam is trying to eat his cake, what is it? Have his cake and eat it too. Something like that. I'm very bad with the phrases like that. That's why my wife always corrects me with that. What can we do? Now, if you look at it, and that's what he says, V'imkein nimsa Rambam kimizak ishtara lebeit trei. Shepasak, he passed in the Halacha Yud, Ish Ada Edi Isha V'Isha Shada Edi Ish Lokin. You get Makos, which is like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, right? That said that it's Asur from the Lashon Basra of Minayin, that you can't do this because of Lo Yobash, but he also passes like the Lashon Kama. The Avarat Beit HaShech Beit HaErva Ina Asur min HaTorah. And that's not like Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, but rather like the Tana. So it explains the Beit Yosef that really the way to explain this Rambam is that the Tanakama and Rav Elazar ben Yaakov are actually not arguing, which comes to a very important point, and then we will try to bring it more to the Purim case. Ve'efshar lomar de Rambam mefaresh dechi amrinan mibayle lechetanya. When do we say that we need for the bright to teach me lo yechle glever, right? That Rav Elazar ben Yaakov doesn't argue on that statement. Nami Matzi, we thought it was a machloka between Rav Elazar ben Yaakov and the Tanakama. Rav Elazar ben Yaakov also darshans that pasuk. The ad kan lo asar Rav Elazar ben Yaakov l'takim b'tikuni isha. Listen to how the Beit Yosef is explaining the Rambam. The only isur of wearing the opposite gender's clothes is b'midei diminka, where it is clear. And that's what Rav Zera Yaakov was saying when he said minayin, that woman can't wear, a gun. He was giving a siman. He was saying, what type of the opposite gender's clothes can you not wear? Where it's clear. The levisha klei zayin di isha. Things that are clear, it's out in the open. It's clear that you're wearing the other person's clothes. Aval heicha de midmar, if it's something that's hidden, like inside your body, beit hashecha, beit erba, einu bechlal zeh. It's not included. V'tamei mishum de darish toiva b'chiyai gavna lo yechli gever. What's the toiva? It's bahanu gavni dimatzel meisi minayu. It's the isur of, and this is what Rashi had said in one of the feasts. The isur of wearing the garments is in a way that it's going to become dimatzel meisi minayu lidei toiva. That you're going to come to this toiva, i.e., the mechalef ish bi-isha, o isha bi-ish, that people are going to mix you up and actually think you're a woman or a man. V'afapi, and here's the chiddush of the Beit Yosef, even if v'afapi she'eno, Risi, you're not going to like this so much. V'afapi she'eno mechalef el b'davar echad. Only one thing you're switching, one clothing, whatever it is. Uvachol shar dvarav hu nikar yafeh, afilu hachi, still asra Torah dumyo de klei zayin di isha. Sh'af al pi that shar dvarim it's minker shapir she isha, still it's asur. Shekol shu mechalef, even if he switches, even davar echad, it's asur. But that's only things that are nikar to the eye. But dvarim that are nistarim min ha'ayin, even if they're different between a man and a woman, since it's not being seen, for example, taking the hair from the armpits, lo otzi lechlufe behu mi ish lisha, lefikach einam bechlal isur deoraita, because it's not going to come to a toiva, and that's how it's not a contradiction. But what the Beit Yosef is explaining for the Rambam is that the isur deoraita is a ma'isa levisha that's actually what? That's actually going to lead to the toiva. His chidush is even if it's only one garment. If it's one garment, that on a certain level will lead to the toiva. So to try to bring this all together, based on our three conceptual frameworks, I want to skip ahead and show you, and we'll bring it all together, is within this idea is how to understand, we're going to come back to these three conceptual frameworks, but is how to understand the isur. Is the isur, it's connected to the things we asked. Is it an isur of an action? I cannot put on the clothes. Or is there two different ways to phrase it? Or is it just a result? It's not me doing a maisa of levisha, of putting on the woman's clothes. Or the result, the problem is the result. The result is I am now dressed like a woman, or vice versa. This is what Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked. He was asked that can a man take a pill? And as a result, his gray hair from this pill will now become black. Meaning the maisa of tzviya, of dyeing your hair, is a maisa of tikkun nashim. So what the question is based on was this chakir. Was this question, is the isur an isur maisa? Or is it the result? The bottom line is now, by doing this, I now have done a woman piece. I'm now mitukan like a woman. And he ends up saying, we're not going through the tshuva, it's there for you. He ends up saying that, that's the tshuva on page 5, if you want to look at it, not now, is that it's an isser totzah, it's the result. And therefore, it's not the isser maisa of taking the pill. The pill I could take, it could be a Tylenol. What do you know? That's not a maisa of being like a woman. The isser is one of a result. Not to confuse you, but maybe to confuse you, not going to confuse you yet. This very much connects to our question. If you go back to the Ramah, okay, which is, our question is, I'm wearing Purim clothes, right? I'm Purim costume. Now I want to dress up like a woman. Am I allowed to do this halachically? Right? So the Ramah already says, if you skipped ahead, right, to page 6, let's go back to that Ramah. The Ramah quotes and says, Uma shenagu lobosh partzufim bepurim, v'gever lovesh simlat isha v'isha kli gever, ein isur b'davar. There's no problem. Me'achar she'ein mechavnim ela l'simcha be'alma. Look what he says. He says, what does he say? I'm allowed to put on the women's clothes. Why? Because my kavana is not to become like a woman, or vice versa, but it's for Simchas Purim. The same idea when I'm dancing at a wedding. I'm not trying to dress up like a woman or a man, but what? I'm trying to be mesameach chatan v'kala. That's my kavana. So within the question here, within what we've talked about, what it meant, one could say that it depends on what we're talking about here. If you say that what? If it's a maise levisha, I don't care what your intention is. I don't care what your intention is, right? The totzah piece, the result, could very well be like the Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim, which argues on this Beit Yosef, which we just saw possibly. The Pri Megadim, which is quoted by Mishnah Berurah, gives a middle shita. We'll see the Bach disagrees with this. But the Pri Megadim says, V'yiret, if all the Malbushim, this is what Risi had said, if everything is of a man, but there's one Malbush of a woman, then it's Nikar Haim, then according to many, many Deot in Yoredeya, not like what we just saw from the Beit Yosef, Ein Isur Torachi Agavna, and therefore Ein Limchot Bepurim. Which means, if I understand, at least how I understand, if the Isser is a Maisel Avisha, so you could say any Maisel Avisha. You could say any Maisel Avisha that you have, I don't care what your intention is, right? That's what the Beit Yosef had said. Any Maisel Avisha, or any Maisel Avisha that we had saw, which will lead to maybe some sort of Znut, that is Asur. But if the Isser is like Rav Moshe said, the Isser is the result, that now, I don't care what your intention is, you're now a woman. You're dressed like a woman. Right? So the Pri Megadim very clearly would work out very nicely because I'm dressed like a man, I have everything looks like a man, and I have a sheitel on. Right? So you're not going to call me a woman at that point. So that would be one way to understand the Pri Megadim and why you would be allowed definitely that way to be dressed. That way. Just give me one more second. Just because of time-wise now. The other way, which seems to be the other chakira here, is not the maisa versus the totzah, but it's what's your intention. Okay, this is the Bach brings up also, even though he himself rejects it, which is the other way to view it is, and it's very much connected to these three conceptual frameworks which we talked about originally. Is it an Isser Maisa? You can't put on women's clothes for what Natanat said, and we had saw from the Chizkuni, possibly the Sefer HaChinuch, or is not just the Maisa, but it's what I'm doing with that Maisa. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to what? Trying to be like a woman. Or vice versa. I'm trying to be like a man. We have that Isur like Lo Telchu B'chukoteim. According to many Rishonim, the Isur is I can't be like the Goyim. I can't try to be like the Goyim. Right? But for example, the famous idea of wearing the doctor's white coat, I'm allowed to do that, even the Goyim do it, because I'm not trying to be like the Goyim. So again, one could have said here that what's going on here? That's what the Ramah says. Am I trying to be like a woman? No. What am I doing? I'm trying to be misameach chatan v'kala. I'm trying to be misameach simchat Purim. And therefore, it would be allowed. It's called the davar she'enu miskavin. And that's really what the Ramah continues saying, that kilayim betzitzis. Right? Kilayim on a Purim costume. Again, it could be the same idea that it's a davar she'enu miskavin. Since it's a davar she'enu miskavin, therefore, I would be allowed to even wear this costume. As opposed to, again, if it's a Maisa Levisha, it could be a problem. One other svara, I will tell you, first of all, the Bach rejects that. The Bach rejects it because the Sefer Yereim says, it seems to be because the Yereim says it's a Maisa Levisha. The Yereim, if you looked at the language inside, just because of time-wise, you look in the Tshuva, and this is why Rav Ovadia is very against it, from the Sefer Yereim, from the Bach, they say, look, it's an Isser Maisa Levisha, right? It's an isser. I don't care if it's the arai. I don't care what your intention is. Your intent doesn't matter. Your intention. It's a ma'aseh levisha. Once you put on woman's clothes, that's asur. I don't care what your intention is. The Bach, even if you wanted to say the side of not wanting to be like a woman, he rejects that because the Uraim knew that, and he said that the only time you're allowed to do that is, for example, when you're freezing outside. So you take a woman's coat, or you're selling, you're a salesperson, and you want to try on kilayim. So that's the only way you could do that, right? There's no other way. I'm freezing. There's no other way. As opposed to, he says here, look, there are other ways to have simchat Purim. There are other ways to have simcha in marriage, in b'samech chatan v'kala. One other svara that the Mari mints. It's very cool. I give you the little biography over here. All of his stuff was burnt. We only have 18 of his chuvot. 16 of his chuvot. So it's cool that the Ramah actually quotes it. It's one of the 16 chuvot that is taught. He said the other way to understand the heter of why you'd be able to dress up like the other gender would be similar the question of a man looking in the mirror. The Yerushalmi in Masechet Avodah Zarah says that a man cannot look in the mirror, because again, that's a tikkun of nashim. Rav Avadia Yosef brings down, and he himself says, is that's only in a place when only women do that. And then you're saying what you're doing is an act of tikkun nashim. But nowadays, when guys are looking in the mirror also, that's not called tikkun of nashim. So the same thing the Marim Mitz wants to say, since everyone is dressing up on Purim, right? So it could very well be that now, when I'm wearing a woman's clothes, this is how I understood it. His language was that, this is how I understood it. It's not 100% clear what his svara is, but at least how I understood it. Let's see what his language was. One second. Where'd he go? He said,
where is this Kevan Shena Mechaber in the New York?
There it is. Now it's on top of page 7. He says, Amalahani Tosas Ba'atra Denagi Anashim V'Nashim B'Shave Lesbe Mishum Lo Yilbash. Okay? And he says, Svar Lomar, the Mishum Simchat Purim Kule Alma Shavim L'Kula. So one way to understand that, I'm not sure, but is that basically when everyone's dressing up, so it no longer has the status called women's clothes or men's clothes. You know what it's called? It's called a Purim costume. That's what it's called now. So it's not even a matter of, well, I'm trying to be like a woman, not trying to be like a woman. It's clearly not that issue. We've run out of time. Just a quick bottom line, just again, other nafkaminas will be, is it any type of clothes? This would be a nafkamina between our conceptual framework. Is it any type of clothes, or is it clothes that are of beauty, right? If they were clothes of Avodah Zarah, obviously it would be connected also. The bottom line is that it's a machlokes, the Ramah, as much as he says it's mekel in the Ramah to wear women's clothes, if you're a man, or vice versa. In the Darkei Moshe, which is his commentary in the Torah, he said it's better to try to be machmir. The Rav Avadia is very against it, based on the Uraim, based on the Bach, who seemingly are saying that it's just an Isser Ma'aseh Levisha. For people, there's definitely room to be mekel if you have that inclination, based on the Ramah. The best thing probably to do is to follow the Pri Megadim also, as much as that, be clear who you are, even if you want to, take something else from the other gender. Everyone should have a meaningful Purim.